There comes a point in many men's lives when having fewer friends stops feeling like a problem. When they're younger, being surrounded by people can feel important. There are friends from school, coworkers, neighbors, drinking buddies, men they watch sports with, and people they call simply because something is happening. But as the years pass, that circle can become smaller and smaller. Then, one day, a man reaches his 60s and realizes something that might have worried him 30 years earlier. He doesn't have many friends anymore. And, strangely enough, he may be perfectly fine with that. If you enjoy conversations about the psychology of men, aging, and relationships, consider joining our membership. You'll find exclusive videos there where we explore these subjects in greater depth. The link is in the description below. Now, when people see an older man spending most of his time alone, they often assume something must be wrong. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe nobody likes him. Maybe he has become difficult to be around. But that isn't always the story. Some senior men genuinely reach a stage where they no longer need a large social circle to feel good about themselves. They've spent decades meeting people, maintaining friendships, attending gatherings, and learning what genuine companionship actually feels like. So, when they choose their own company, it isn't necessarily because they couldn't find anyone to spend time with. Sometimes they've simply stopped measuring a good life by how many people are standing around them. And once a man no longer needs a crowd to feel complete, friendship starts meaning something very different. For a senior man who has become comfortable with his own company, one of the biggest changes is that he no longer feels pressured to belong everywhere. He doesn't need an invitation every weekend. He doesn't need a phone filled with messages to feel important. And he doesn't need to stay connected to people simply so he can say he has friends. That need for approval may have mattered much more when he was younger. Back then, fitting in could mean going places he didn't enjoy, laughing at conversations he wasn't interested in, or maintaining friendships simply because everyone had known each other for years. Age can change that. A man in his 60s has usually had enough experience to know when he's being himself and when he's performing for other people. If he has to constantly change his personality, hide his opinions, or tolerate behavior he dislikes just to remain part of a group, being alone may genuinely feel better. This doesn't mean he has rejected friendship. He may still enjoy a long conversation with someone he trusts. He may appreciate having coffee with an old friend or spending an afternoon with someone whose company he genuinely enjoys. But now there has to be a reason for the connection, beyond simply avoiding an empty house. That's an important difference. He isn't spending time with someone because solitude frightens him. He's spending time with them because their company adds something worthwhile to his day. And when nobody like that is available, he can go home, close the door, and still be content. For some senior men, that is when having fewer friends stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like freedom. Something else changes when a man becomes comfortable spending time alone. He starts discovering how much he actually enjoys it. What once looked boring from the outside can become one of the best parts of his day. He may wake up early, make his coffee, sit somewhere quiet, and feel absolutely no urge to call anyone. He can take a long walk without needing company, work in his garden, read, listen to music, drive somewhere alone, or spend an afternoon doing whatever interests him without having to accommodate another person's plans. And during those hours, his mind has room to breathe. For a man who has spent decades working, raising a family, meeting deadlines, answering questions, and constantly dealing with other people's demands, having several uninterrupted hours to himself can feel incredibly valuable. He also becomes more comfortable with his own thoughts. He doesn't need conversations simply to fill silence. In fact, endless small talk may begin to feel more tiring than enjoyable. He would rather have one meaningful conversation with someone he respects than spend an entire evening discussing things he doesn't care about just for the sake of being social. This is why calling every older man who spends time alone antisocial can be misleading. He may enjoy people very much. He's simply become more particular about the kind of interaction he wants. Give him good company and he'll appreciate it. Give him forced conversation, gossip, or a gathering he doesn't want to attend, and he may happily choose his chair at home instead. Because after enough years of constant noise, silence doesn't always feel empty. Sometimes it feels like exactly what he needed. As a man gets older, he also becomes less willing to keep friendships alive simply because they've existed for a long time. Knowing someone for 20 or 30 years doesn't automatically mean the friendship still belongs in his life today. People change. The friend he once had everything in common with may now spend every conversation complaining, criticizing others, spreading gossip, or bringing problems wherever he goes. Another may only call when he needs money, a favor, or someone to listen to another crisis. And eventually, an older man starts asking himself why he's holding on to a friendship that leaves him feeling worse every time they meet. When he was younger, he might have tolerated it. He may have thought, we've known each other forever. He might have continued showing up because walking away felt disloyal. But years of experience can make a man more selective. He begins to understand that history alone isn't enough to make a friendship healthy. If every meeting comes with negativity, unnecessary drama, competition, or disrespect, he may decide that keeping the friendship simply isn't worth the effort anymore, and he doesn't always replace that person. That's the part people often misunderstand. A senior man may end a friendship and make absolutely no effort to find someone new. He isn't desperately searching for another person to fill the empty space. He may actually enjoy having that space back. Because once a man becomes comfortable with fewer people around him, losing the wrong company doesn't necessarily feel like losing something valuable. Sometimes what disappears is the obligation, the frustration, and the feeling that he has to keep giving his time to someone simply because they've known each other for years. After enough years of dealing with people, many senior men become very good at noticing things they once ignored. They pay attention to how someone speaks when they're angry, how they behave when they don't get their way, whether they keep their word, and whether a friendship feels genuine or only convenient. A younger man may notice these things and brush them aside. An older man has often seen enough to know where certain behaviors can lead. He recognizes the friend who always turns everything into a competition. He notices when compliments have a little insult hidden inside them. He knows when someone is listening because they care, and when they're only waiting for their turn to speak. And he becomes especially aware of people who are friendly when life is going well, but disappear the moment he needs something. This doesn't mean senior men can read minds or that their judgment is always correct. Experience simply gives them more situations to compare. After 60 years of meeting different personalities, making mistakes, trusting the wrong people, and discovering who actually stayed when life became difficult, a man may become harder to impress. Charm isn't enough anymore. Popularity isn't enough. Even having a long history together isn't enough. He wants to know how he feels after spending time with someone. Does the conversation feel genuine? Can he relax around this person? Can they disagree without turning everything into a fight? If the answer is repeatedly no, he may decide that being alone is easier. And when a man becomes this selective, his circle can become very small without him feeling that anything is missing. There is another reason some senior men end up with very few friends, and it has nothing to do with an argument or falling out. Sometimes, two people simply stop wanting the same kind of life. Think about a friendship that began when two men were 25. Back then, they may have enjoyed the same places, talked about the same things, and spent almost every weekend together. 40 years later, those two men can be completely different people. One may still enjoy crowded bars, drinking late into the night, gossiping about other people, or doing the same things they've done for decades. The other may now prefer early mornings, better health, meaningful conversations, learning something new, or simply spending more time at home. Neither man necessarily did anything wrong. They just grew in different directions. And this can be difficult to accept because we're often taught that real friendships should last forever. But sometimes keeping an old friendship alive requires a man to keep being an older version of himself. Senior men who are comfortable alone don't always feel the need to do that. If a friendship no longer fits the person they've become, they may allow it to fade without turning it into a fight. They don't necessarily hate the other person. They can appreciate the memories and still recognize that they have very little in common today. This is one reason an older man's social circle may become smaller while his life actually feels more comfortable. He's no longer collecting friendships simply because they have history. He's choosing company that fits the man he is now, not the man he happened to be 30 years ago. There is a freedom that comes when a senior man stops worrying about how his social life looks to other people. He no longer feels embarrassed because his phone isn't constantly ringing. He doesn't feel obligated to attend every gathering. And seeing other people surrounded by large groups doesn't automatically make him question his own life. He has learned that being surrounded by people and having genuine companionship are two very different things. A man can know dozens of people and still have nobody he can truly trust. He can attend parties every weekend and still come home feeling disconnected. On the other hand, he can have one good friend, or sometimes none for a period of time, and still wake up feeling satisfied with his life. That understanding can take years to develop. When men are younger, friendships often come naturally because life constantly puts people together. School creates friendships, work creates friendships, raising children introduces other parents, sports, neighborhoods, and social events keep people connected. Later in life, those environments change. Retirement may remove coworkers from his daily life. Children build lives of their own. Friends move away, develop health problems, or become occupied with family. Some friendships simply fade because nobody is making the effort anymore. A senior man who is secure within himself doesn't always see this as something that needs to be fixed immediately. He may miss certain people without feeling desperate for replacements. He may enjoy companionship while still appreciating the independence of having his own schedule, his own routines, and his own space. And perhaps that's one of the biggest differences. He no longer asks, "How many friends do I have?" Like he starts asking, "Do the people in my life make it better?" When the answer is yes, he values them deeply. When the answer is no, having fewer people around can feel far better than keeping company simply to avoid being alone. Another thing that changes for many senior men is how they decide who deserves access to their time. At this age, friendship is no longer something they maintain automatically. They want to know that the relationship works both ways. For years, a man may have been the friend who always called first, organized the meeting, drove across town, offered help, remembered birthdays, and showed up whenever somebody needed him. He may not have questioned it when he was younger, because that's simply what friendship meant to him. But eventually, he notices when the effort is always coming from one direction. So he stops calling for a while, and something interesting happens. The phone doesn't ring. The people he thought were close friends don't check on him. Some only reappear months later when they need advice, assistance, a connection, or a favor. That can tell a man more about a friendship than years of casual conversation ever did. At this stage, he may decide he would rather have no friendship than constantly maintain one by himself. That doesn't mean he expects everyone to give exactly what he gives. People have different responsibilities and different ways of showing they care, but there should still be some sense that both people genuinely want the friendship. Senior men often become less interested in chasing people just to keep a connection alive. If you call, he'll answer. If you visit, he'll welcome you. If the friendship is genuine, he'll value it. But he may no longer run after someone who repeatedly shows that the relationship matters only when it's convenient for them. And once he stops doing all the work, he sometimes discovers that his circle was smaller than he thought. For some men, that realization hurts. For others, it brings clarity. One thing many senior men eventually become comfortable with is the possibility that their circle may never become large again. And surprisingly, they may not want it to. They aren't sitting at home counting how many friendships they've lost. Their attention has moved toward the life directly in front of them. They may enjoy their morning routine, work around the house, spend time outdoors, take care of their health, visit family, pursue an old interest, or finally have time for things they postponed for years. Friendship still matters, but it no longer has to occupy every empty space. This is important because being alone and feeling lonely are not always the same experience. A man can spend an entire afternoon by himself and genuinely enjoy it. Another person can sit at a table surrounded by friends and still feel as though nobody really knows him. For an older man, the quality of the connection often matters far more than simply having company. He may have reached a stage where pretending feels exhausting. He doesn't want to laugh at jokes he doesn't find funny, agree with opinions just to avoid disagreement, or keep accepting invitations he would rather decline. If genuine friendship comes into his life, he can welcome it. But he doesn't have to force it. And that may be what younger people misunderstand when they see a senior man who seems perfectly content with very few friends. They assume something is missing because they imagine how they would feel in his situation. But he may not feel deprived at all. After spending much of his life surrounded by expectations, responsibilities, and other people's voices, having the freedom to decide when he wants company and when he wants to be alone can become one of the things he values most. So, if you're a man over 60 with very few friends, don't be too quick to assume that something has gone wrong with your life. Look at the reasons behind it. Maybe you no longer need a crowd to feel accepted. Maybe you've discovered that you genuinely enjoy your own company. Perhaps you've become more careful about who receives your time, or you've simply grown apart from people who once made sense in an earlier chapter of your life. None of that means friendship has lost its value. A good friend can still make life richer. Someone you can trust, laugh with, speak openly to, and call when life becomes difficult is worth holding on to. The point isn't to push good people away or convince yourself that you need nobody. It's recognizing that friendship should be genuine. As men grow older, many stop asking relationships to look impressive from the outside. 10 acquaintances cannot replace one person who truly knows you. A crowded room cannot guarantee connection, and spending Friday night alone doesn't automatically mean you're lonely. Sometimes you're simply comfortable. So I want to ask the senior men watching this, how has friendship changed for you as you've gotten older? Do you still have a large circle, a few close friends, or have you reached a stage where you genuinely prefer your own company? Let me know in the comments because I think many men will recognize themselves in your answer. If this video gave you a different way of looking at friendship after 60, like the video, subscribe, and share it with another man who might relate. Because having fewer friends isn't always about losing people. Sometimes it's about finally understanding what kind of company is worth keeping.